Welcome to the Milk Bottle e-commerce show, brought to you by Milk Bottle Labs, one of the world's top-rated accredited Shopify experts. The Irish-based Milk Bottle Labs team upgrade, migrate, manage and advise some of the highest-performing Shopify stores worldwide. Founder Keith Matthews interviews merchants, developers, fellow agency owners and Shopify folk to share as many Shopify tips and tricks as possible. If you're planning on upgrading to Shopify 2.0 or migrating over to Shopify, reach out. Milk Bottle will help. Now over to Keith.
What does it take to formulate a supplement that wins international awards and actually sells online in a category where every second brand is shouting louder than the last? Welcome back to the Milk Bottle Shopify e-commerce podcast. I'm Keith, and today I'm joined by somebody who spent nearly 15 years answering that exact question. Dr. Daniel Jones is the formulation mind behind Revive Active, Sisterly, and his latest venture, App One, where he's co-founder and chief science officer. He holds a PhD in physiology from UCD. He cut his teeth developing diabetes therapeutics in the US pharmaceutical industry and is a regular voice at global conferences on health, nutrition, and biohacking. Today, we're digging into how wellness and supplement brands can talk about their products, develop their products, and reach the market in a scientifically honest, genuinely engaging, and a way which makes the brands convert. Daniel, huge welcome to the show. Delighted to have you.
Thank you, Keith. Perfectly put. That's exactly why we're here.
Good to talk to you. For our European listeners, our UK and Irish listeners, the brand Revive Active will resonate with a lot of people. Is that one of the brands that would have kicked off this kind of industry in the last 5 or 6 years, last 7 or 8 years?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I actually come from a research background. I really spent a lot of my time starting out at college, working in the pharmaceutical industry in the US. And one of the most interesting things I found in my time in the pharma industry, which is where I wholeheartedly fell in love with research, is this understanding that every US pharmaceutical company has an equally as large, if not larger, nutraceutical division, which is their department where they're studying nutrition, how food and components of our diet are underpinning different mechanisms within our body. And a lot of research in pharmaceuticals piggybacks on that. So, this is really kind of where I started looking through the lens of health and nutrition a bit differently and understanding while pharmaceuticals very much have their place as a very reactive response to something that's going wrong in the body, nutrition can be profoundly protective and profoundly effective as a proactive means of keeping yourself healthy and stopping things from going wrong in the first place. And I've always been a scientist at first. I actually never really truthfully saw myself joining the nutrition industry because, to be wholeheartedly honest, I have a lot of issues with how the nutrition industry functions and what they do. In terms of, a lot of it can be flash and marketing and not as much science and substance. So I never wanted to get into that area of how this industry works. But as a researcher, as someone who was born a very sick kid who grew up with a lot of health complications, who had these kind of epiphany moments throughout my life to realize that there's so much more I could do and that my health was in my hands. We really wanted to start something different and start a new wave of what the nutrition industry could be, not really what it was because it was so archaic and broken. And Revive Active was the first step into that. And we launched that company in Ireland in the midst of a recession, and everyone told us we were mad because it was, a bit crazy at the time to be coming out with this comprehensive powdered sachet. It was very different than anyone I've ever seen. But we wholeheartedly believed we needed to do something different. We needed to do something better. And that was really what set the stage.
Yeah, but let's just go back to the start. Initially, when you were studying, you obviously enjoyed research. But did you think when you were getting into it that it was going to lead you to something that was going to have such an impact? Like the products that you have developed, and I'm a user of some of the products that you've been involved in. The ultimate goal is to improve people's health, and that physical health, and also, of course, mental health. Did you realize that at a young age, or did one follow the other?
So I always say, obviously, we are a product of our experiences and we all have our unique individual journeys, and it's impossible to predict where that journey will take you. I always start it with a very strong desire for science and interest in health and wellness. And a large reason was that is because I was born a very sick kid. I was actually born with ventricle septal disorder. I was born with a hole between my ventricle chambers of my heart. I went into cardiac arrest when I was a baby at my christening. I was extremely sick and hospitalized for years, to the point that I had to have open heart surgery when I was 5 years old. And even though they diagnosed me when I was very young, they had to wait for my body to actually get big enough so they could do the surgery, but not too big where my heart could no longer keep up with the function it needed to. And I would again go into cardiac arrest. So it's kind of a very fine line. So a lot of this experience absolutely instilled me with a number of things. One, a passion for science, a huge interest for well being, and this unrelenting urge to do something with my life that I felt like, I faced my mortality at a very early age. I think a lot earlier than a lot of people do. I always tell the story when I was in the hospital and, my kindergarten class was coming in and giving me cards, and the teacher didn't get the instructions properly. And a lot of the cards are essentially references to, like, me as a ghost and me dying on, because that's what the kids thought was happening to me. And to a
Yeah.
degree that was a real possibility, but I never accepted that. And, I had such an admiration for the people who had dedicated their lives to understand how the heart worked, who could open me up, fix my heart, and give me the rest of my life back. So that's, without a doubt, unequivocally changed everything and became the kind of center point of my world and my universe. And my passion for science really grew and developed. But I never expected to be where I'm at this point in my life. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm never been happier. But I mean, I absolutely went through journeys of, really being passionate about science, but then also falling in love with music. And I was in a band on tour for a number of years. But even during that period, I was, reading all of these research books, and I ended up quitting the band the day that we got offered a record contract and committed full heartedly to
Daniel,
go to.
oh, don't go past that. Go explain. What sort of music?
So we played a lot of like rock and progressive rock at the time. I would have, met the likes of like Aerosmith and Dwayne Johnson, and and I got an amazing experience within the music industry in the US. And one of the things I really took from that is seeing people, who are just born bleeding bred rock stars, and knowing internally that, like, I'm pretty sure I'm a scientist though. Like, I love music, but I'm pretty sure I'm a scientist. So when the time came to that crossroads was, when we were offered the contract, and am I going to go down that path and try to navigate the music industry? Or am I going to change my path and more so follow my heart? And what my heart was telling me was go into science. If I can, change the world, change people's health, and change people's well being. And that's the path that I went down. And, it took a lot of turns where I immediately, initially wanted to go into medicine. And then, I was kind of thinking about veterinary medicine. But then when I was first introduced to research, and it became very clear in my mind that research is this collaborative, collective, global effort and puzzle putting together, that what we know only brings us to, a certain horizon. And beyond that horizon is a complete unknown. And that research requires a lot of, creativity and thinking outside the box to, well, what if this could be the answer in this issue within health? Or what if this could be the nutrient that's missing within this mechanism? And then obviously you follow this up with experimentation and research to just, determine whether or not this is the case or not. But so I absolutely fell in love with the mystery and the puzzle putting together collectively with the globe of what research was. And it really opened a lot of doors that I could be on the cusp of knowledge of what was happening in the nutrition industry. But really, what changed for me was the decision that, like, I love research, but now it's time for me to put myself in a position where I can distill all that down and actually make things for people that they can utilize on a daily basis, and actually, take what we're understanding from research and put it into something that people can use regularly to change their lives.
So, Daniel, for those who don't know, okay, you're a formulation expert, okay, which is a very broad description, okay?
Mhm.
So, you formulate, research, plan the product, and in terms of the production, like if we were to launch a brand, conceive a brand today, does it start with with your role, the formulation expert?
I would. I mean, all research starts with what we call the review process. And, even when I started my doctorate, the first thing I did was I wrote and published a review within my area because, you kind of have to assess what is the current state of things, what are the gaps, what do we understand in research that's not being applied to the market. And that's really the kind of first starting point before we even kind of get to the drawing board of the formulation is where can we enact change and a positive change where something can be done. And then, of course, you have to go to the formulation phase. There's an extremely long development phase before you even start to get into the sampling. And coming from research and my background in my doctorate is in physiology, I there's this kind of current, constant theme that every time you open one door, there's three more staring you in the face. So it's a bit of that, and you can absolutely get lost in the weeds. And you know, it's difficult when you even kind of consider when people tell me something like, "Oh, I'm taking vitamin D. Is this good?" And my first thing is when you understand this industry, like it's not nearly enough information because it can be down to dosages, it can be down to forms, it can be down to the delivery of all these things that are really important. I mean, there are a lot of people I don't think appreciate even like something like B12 or magnesium. There are literally hundreds of different forms of magnesium that all have different properties. We think of magnesium as just magnesium, but I could tell you, even in my lab, I have about 100 different chemical forms, which are all very different. They all have different properties. They all have different absorption rates, benefits. So it can be, a bit of a labyrinth. But the best way to navigate that is to start with a good assessment phase, to start with a good research phase, and to go from there. I've been in this industry long enough that I often refer to myself from concept to shelf. You can have an idea, and I can help you navigate that journey from idea to putting it on the shelf, and now it's out there. But there are a lot of steps in between that. And yes, it requires a lot of diligence. And in our case, we don't compromise in terms of anything that we do, in the quality, in the ingredients that we source, in the formulations that we put together. So that absolutely adds extra time into the whole mix as well.
I suppose to bring this back to Shopify, Shopify has given people the platform to launch to the market.
Mhm.
And there's no doubt about it that Shopify has been the platform of choice in the States, Canada, the UK for nutritional brands, subscription brands selling nutritional items. When you look at what's in the market right now, do you think that people are going through the same process, investing the same amount of research, investing the same amount of time as yourself?
I mean, there would be certain groups that is their primary objective. But, as someone who very honestly, as I said from the outset, is a scientist coming in the nutrition industry with a lot of issues with the nutrition industry. And the only reason I, entered it is because especially with that one, I'm given the opportunity to make the absolute best science backed formulations I can. And then we figure out the rest after that. Because what a lot of people don't understand is, and I've been approached by a lot of organizations which have this mentality, is that it's often, I want to sell a certain type of product at a certain price point. We'll just simplify it. I want to make a bone product and I want to sell it at 19.99, and have it on all the platforms and you can buy it online. Well, when you start slicing that up, okay, well, you need this margin for delivery, for fulfillment, you need this margin if it's going to be in retailers, and then you need all this overhead for the company. So what they'll end up saying to me is you have €1.50 to select ingredients to go into this product. So they engineer it from the end point of what they want to sell, where really that's not the way to do it. And, it's a bit of, Steve Jobs mentality. You start with the problem. You start with what is the issue? And is this issue being addressed within the nutrition industry, within the health industry? Is it not? Okay, understand everything about this issue. You start putting a plan of, how your formulation will work together to address this issue in a number of ways. And then, you eventually get to, well, what's the cost? What do we have to sell it? That's the only way that I would ever work. but it's not common. And I see when I look at the current state of the nutrition industry, there's a lot of saturation in certain areas, and it's kind of just part of, I think, modern, world, that we're just looking to make the next thing of something else. And I've just never been of that mindset. I've never wanted to do that. And in the few times that I've gotten back into the nutrition industry, from Revive to Sisterly, and now, my greatest venture at One, it's always been under the context that I need to be able to make it extremely different, and I need to be able to make it extremely better. That's the only way that you progress and keep moving forward.
So, Daniel, I think the answer to this question is yes, but is it a case that there is also, wholesale producers basically white labeling the same thing and then placing a brand on it and putting it onto Shopify? Is that prevalent?
I mean, more than probably both of us could even really
Yeah.
appreciate.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
I have been, as a formulator myself, I have been approached more times than I can even care to remember about doing formulations for white labeling, and I mean, truth be told, it goes against the core of my soul. I feel like it's very, obviously profit and short term kind of thinking driven. I mean, how can I? And the answer is no. Before I even ask the question, how can I simultaneously create the best formulation for one group who wants to take a product to market, and doing that for another group? It just can't. I can either just make one formulation and it, like you said, white label it and sell it to everyone, but then it just becomes a race of, substance and flash, where I think that we need to get, what I always say, we need to get back to biology. We need to just get back to biology, understand that our lives are changing, our nutritional landscape are changing, our demands are changing, and how can we keep evolving to meet that? And the evolving and adaptation of the few selects, our at One included, our brand included, is really a rare but extremely important differentiator.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you on that. And it is also a worry if it just becomes a commercial move. It's
Hmm.
very easy to write copy about wellness and nutrition and how much people care, but it's nice to see that the brands that you've mentioned, and we'll talk about that one right now, but it's nice to see that the individuals who worked with you on those got exactly what they expected as well, in terms of it's a very genuine modus operandi that you have, which is great to hear.
Yeah.
We brought you online recently with your latest brand at One, and I'm not going to explain what it is because you're talking. So explain to the listeners and the viewers exactly what feelat1.com is.
Well, yeah, I mean, even just as we were just saying, you would be shocked at how little science exists in a lot of these companies out there and a lot of these brands, where again, it can seem like low hanging fruit and white labeling, where, a celebrity or a podcaster or mixed martial arts fighter, all these people, are, just grabbing white label products and putting their name and face and everything behind it and driving that. And there's not really much differentiation. So when we started at One, first of all, it had to start with the science. There's only two co-founders. I have a doctorate in physiology. This is what I do. My co-founder, Uno Hagen, is an amazing pharmacist. Like, she generally is one of the best human beings I've ever encountered on this planet. She cares so much. She puts people's health and wellness above all else. And I have just mounds and mounds and mounds of respect and care for everything that she does. So it had to start with the science. But with that one, we had a really focus objective. Again, it had to be different and it had to be better. And one thing that we did in our assessment phase, like I said, you have to start with that research phase and assessing what is out there, what are the means, what are the problems. We kept coming back to the core issue. And what is the core issue? Is that two things: every product pretty much out there on the market is dealing symptom focused. It's that kind of old colloquial term of putting a band-aid on an axe wound. And that is a lot of formulations out there where, you're purchasing something for energy, and it's either just driving you with stimulants like caffeine or things like this, or, it's trying to bombard your physiology with, inexpensive but like essential nutrients like B12 and B12, choline, and glutathione, all these things that are good for energy, but not looking at how they work together. But we wanted to get to the core of the issue, and the core of the issue kept coming back as inflammation. This is what's driving everything that's going wrong in our body in the first place. So instead of putting a band-aid on the symptoms of, well, I have poor energy, I have poor sleep, I have poor focus, I have poor digestion, I have poor bone health, poor skin health. But what is driving all these things? Almost all of the time, they're being driven by inflammation, excessive inflammation in the body, which is dysregulating your normal processes. So, at one, wanted to take an extremely different approach and get to the core root of what was going on that was wrong, which was inflammation, and address this comprehensively. We have a spectrum of nutrients that are working through every single system in the body, whether your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, your endocrine system. That's at one is taking a comprehensive, multifaceted approach to these problems by one, addressing the issue and helping to support these things with the essential vitamins like glutathione, B12, but also much more expensive nutrients that you wouldn't find in most formulations because they're expensive, like CoQ10 and carnitine, which are also some of the most well researched and scientifically beneficial for promoting energy. But while we're doing that, we're also addressing that inflammation, which is driving all these issues in the first place and helping to reduce inflammation. So by taking this, double down approach, it has way more beneficial and noticeable and pronounced results because we're coming at it from multiple angles and we're not just addressing the symptoms. And this coupled with at one's very unique approach to, again, getting it back to biology. We've done a morning and evening formulation very specifically because we are trying to support the physiology. And this idea of a one size fits all formulation to cover you all day, it just never made sense. Where we have very different needs turning on when we're starting up in the morning, we're engaging our metabolism, we are upregulating our energy and our focus, to when we're actually going to rest and recover at night, calming down, shutting down, needing that peaceful mind for proper sleep and sleep recovery. And because our body's doing so much when we're sleeping, we have to support that. That really gives it that truly holistic 24-hour coverage, supporting our 24-hour circadian rhythm of our evening and mornings while addressing inflammation, while addressing the symptoms. That kind of three-prong approach isn't done anywhere else in the globe. And trust me, we've looked, we've spent years in that assessment phase, and we realize that everyone's been shooting at the wrong target. And if we actually just step outside that box, look at things from a different perspective, that we can take the most unique and comprehensive approach that has ever been done in the globe when it comes to health formulation. And that's why, and I know firsthand, the feedback and the response that we've gotten from people is overwhelming and incredible.
You mentioned a morning and evening. Okay, that's very different to anything else that is out there, and it's an interesting point because I always got the impression that there's no way any supplement could ever last a full day, considering that you're going to be using the toilet during the day. I mean, if you're putting a liquid into your body, it could be gone out within 2 hours. So has it been difficult for you to get that point across to people, or do people? I know online, and I know that even your packaging. I mean, you mentioned Una earlier on, by the way. I am just as big a fan of Una as yourself. Una was on the podcast quite a few years ago, and the interview was so long we cut it in two. So I'm going to put the link into the show notes, and anybody that has any interest in health, any interest in business, any interest in leadership, any interest in successful females, it's the best interview. And I gave the interview, so I'm biased, but I'm going to put the link in the show notes. But to go back to the point, the packaging of the product was brilliant. And Una is a pharmacist, but also one of the first pharmacists in Ireland to bring her business online. And packaging, Una has, and the team at Mars have always led in packaging. So your marketing is good, your branding is good, but is that a difficult message to get across to people when people just expect to get up at 7:30 in the morning, throw it into a glass, and expect it to work for the day?
It is. I mean, education really is at the forefront of everything that we do. And, this is what something that I realized pretty early into my nutritional industry career, which was, similar to the story about like, McDonald's and the founders, and realizing, having this kind of epiphany moment of what type of company they really were, in terms of real estate, much more than a fast food. it was similar to us that, we are education first and the nutrition and supplementation comes second. Our primary job is to inform, is to help supply this very important information in terms of what people need, why it's beneficial, why we need to even take it in the first place, the actual need for supplementation. But of course, this is major hurdle to overcome, especially when you're going into unknown territory. When I first started in this industry, things were way simpler. We're going back to 2010 now, 2009, 2010. Things are way simpler. There was way more just capsules. It was just straight to the point. But it was broken. It was a broken industry, and we had a lot of issues with that. So when we came in with very different messaging, with a very different approach, there's this latency lag time for that to kind of start, penetrating and for people to understand. But that is what you build a foundation on. It has to be on knowledge first, the communication, and like you said, it's every single thing about the brand. It's the formulation, it's the sustainability, it's the efficacy, it's the community. All of these things that we really, really pride ourselves that we focus on. Obviously, the formulations, the science comes first above all else. But having all of those aspects part of our business is so important to make us a positively holistic approach to business, similar to what we're trying to do health wise.
Are you enjoying the world of e-commerce? I know your experience in pretty much every industry, but like we went through the launch together, we went through the build. Are you enjoying it, or is it just a stress? You can answer
No,
that.
I mean, I look, there's so many things that go on, on a day-to-day basis. I can often, get a bit lost in the weeds or be like a horse with blinders. And, I'm so focused on just constantly improving what we're doing in every aspect. You know, the e-commerce parts, it feels, I mean, I'm going to give Shopify some credit. Like, the platform is fantastic and they make it so much easier and simple to do everything, and it's such an important part of what we do. But when we have so much to do, it's great to be able to kind of nearly that running itself to a degree. But then you also do have these moments where you're like, you've been bogged down in the lab or you've been reading research papers, and then you go on to the Shopify platform, you're like, oh yeah, like forget that there's thousands of people buying this constantly, and you
Yeah,
just have to keep up with the stock demands. And that's been, yourself, that's been one of our issues, is just
that's the
keeping the stock
challenge.
in the door. But it was amazing. I mean, we were over the moon with the response, but it just completely caught us off guard that we didn't really realize that people would appreciate how differently we're doing things and how effectively we're doing things and how that would resonate with people. But it's been amazing, and thank God we've had the support of yourself and Shopify platform and just everyone on the team.
Yeah. Have you downloaded the Shopify app? Have you heard the ching ching?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I try not to, because I have a bit of an obsessive personality. Sometimes I could be just sitting there staring at it, so I have to,
Yeah.
make sure I keep time with, keep time balanced. But like again, it's so handy, and it's great to have that constant insight and be able to so quickly respond to things that you need to or changes and make any things with accounts and stuff like that. So it just, yeah, you need really powerful and valuable tools on a journey like this.
That's very well put, actually. But I think it's probably nice for yourself to be so in the weeds, and you talk about research a lot. Like Shopify is a very complex platform, but the app and the dashboard just make it so simple and so enjoyable to be involved in. And
Absolutely.
you have to give them credit for making it look easy at the front end. You know.
They really do. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Like, I mean, how easily the platform can make everything.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Daniel, it was a pleasure to talk to you, and genuinely thanks for trusting us with the project. We're going to leave all the links in the show notes, and we wish you all the best with your new launch at feelat1.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you much, Keith. Really appreciate you and Milk Bottle and the whole team. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. All of our episodes are available on Apple, Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. If you're an e-commerce professional with an exciting story to tell, reach out to the team on hello@milkbottlelabs.com. Until the next time, take care.